Welcome to the eighth episode of Gen Z Investing Insights. It's a very special episode because we have the CEO and co-founder of Quirk. Quirk is an app that empowers people to be in control of their money and feel secure about their financial decisions that they're making, and also use the wealth of data and intelligence out there to benefit. Uh, CEO and the CEO of Quirk is Nikos Melachrinos. Nikos, what is your story? How did you grow up, and what was high school like? Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Jacob. Pleasure to be on the pod with you guys. So yeah, I'm Nikos. I'm originally Greek. I grew up in Athens, Greece. What was high school like? You're taking me way back. It was a great experience. I guess growing up more of the studious type, until I started getting involved like with football, soccer in the US, and I think that got me more out of my shell, which was great, made me a bit more sociable. Went to a kind of small Greek high school, and it was a very kind of supportive community, and I was one of the few people who ended up going to study out in the US. And I think, I've always reflected on the fact that, the college admission process is a very stressful time for a lot of high schoolers, and I'm kind of glad that I was in an environment where it just felt really competitive and not helpful to kind of your mental health in that age. So none of my friends were going to the US, so they were all like, we want this to succeed for you. So yeah, I went out to the States. I was at Brown, where I did an economics degree. After which, I went out to San Francisco, where I worked for a legal tech startup. I was just kind of increasingly getting passionate about the tech things, and it felt like I just had to go into the heart of it, and live it myself. After 2 years doing that, I moved to London, where I helped that startup sort of expand into Europe. A year and a half into that, we got acquired by a bigger tech player. At which point, I sort of really felt that I was just getting much more interested in all things product. So I went and did a product design degree in London, at the end of which, I ended up starting my company Quirk, which, yeah, I'd love to kind of get more into with you guys.
Yeah, tell us about Quirk. How'd you come up with Quirk?
Yeah, I studied economics. I guess I was always like a little more, money savvy, and naturally slipped into a role of, talking to my friends about it, or them coming to me, to talk about finances. I always felt that you never really learned it through any kind of like, formal channels. And I think also there's a lot of issues around like income inequality in the world, and the problems it causes. And so it was something that I was always very interested in. And while I was doing a design degree, I always felt that financial services are just not really well built for humans, and tend to capitalize on the sort of lack of knowledge. So I thought we could build something that's just like more user friendly, it's more approachable, uses kind of like simpler, better language, as well as the fact that in Europe we had the sort of tech innovation of open banking, which meant banks had to kind of give, to other companies the ability to access banking data. So I thought, banks are very slow and non-innovative. So we can come in with a more tech-based solution, use good design, take data from the banks, and, surface that to users in a way that sort of makes sense for them. And so I met this girl, Nafisa, during grad school. So she's kind of more of a true product designer with like 7-8 years experience with startups in SF, and we just sort of put our heads together, and once we graduated, started working on it.
That's great. I loved Quirk. I took the personality test.
Yeah,
I was
amazing.
the yeah, I was great. I was the savvy spender, which I didn't think I was, but
Yeah.
it gave me the insights and the explanations. It was great. I really liked it. The next question I have, which is a little more complex, is that Gen Z has grown up with the internet and consequently has been exposed and targeted to advertisements from a very young age. Do you think Gen Z would be more or less financially responsible than previous generations?
Yeah, it's a layered question for sure. Um, if you look at purely the data, like obviously Gen Z, and I think this is just an age bias, are less financially literate than other generations, but that's because, a lot of people tend to sort of get more into finance as they grow older. But nevertheless, there is a lot more access to resources. So even from like schooling, you see that there's kind of like more courses offered towards Gen Z. And at the same time, you obviously have everything that's happening, social media, internet, as you're saying. I think the pandemic was a kind of great impetus for a lot of younger people to sort of start getting into it. And so I feel like over time we will see them overtaking kind of older generations just through the availability of information. But there's also kind of like an opposite force at play here, which, I have very mixed feelings of about, because money has become a lot more accessible. And even though on the one hand, it means if you equip yourself with the knowledge, you can actually use it and kind of manipulate it in a way that suits you. On the flip side of that, it's you can kind of get into like a slippery slope very easily. Access to, services with credit is easier. Buy now, pay later. And also just like money is becoming a lot more intangible. It just kind of moves through numbers on a screen, not like paper physical money. And so when you lose a little bit of that friction of exchange and it becomes just very fluid and it moves easily between your apps and all these things that you're doing, you kind of lose touch with the reality of it. And it's easier to kind of get into like a more dangerous debt cycle or like riskier investments. So that's why it's a bit of a double-edged sword in my opinion. So it's kind of really up to the person to use a lot of the resource out there. And we've definitely tried to be one of those kind of more expert and, really friendly and approachable resources.
Perfect.
Yeah,
So you kind of went into this. Oh, so
Pierce,
you
you go
kind of
for
went
it.
into this already. But I'm really curious. Like, what was your inspiration behind creating this app?
Yeah, it's at the sort of bare bones of it is the fact that financial literacy is and remains a huge problem for a lot of young people. And we just felt that there wasn't enough services just like really addressing their needs in a very sort of direct way. And I'm also kind of a person who just really believes in the value of good design to transform user experiences and people's relationship with services. And I always felt that there wasn't enough sort of design thinking and kind of, user-led approach in financial services. And that's kind of how we sort of put all of our skills together for Quirk.
Perfect. And if you could go back and really give yourself a piece of advice, or someone of our generation a piece of advice, what would you tell yourself?
Yeah, if I thought about it in a, personal growth point of view, I would tell myself not to rush. I think when you're young, there's always this feeling that you sort of have to get to the end point quickly. You have to achieve quickly. And I was definitely one of those people, when you get into like a very, high ranking school where just people are just doing a lot of great, interesting things, it's natural to feel like you also have to achieve a lot. But as I've sort of, I hit 30s earlier this year, and I've just kind of come more into a sense of things take time, and there is also a lot of time. And it's a lot better to sort of be able to have endurance in your pursuits and find things that you're really passionate about over just trying to like very quickly get to that destination, and sort of relieving yourself a little bit of anxiety. Let yourself like build kind of like deep skills, deep interests, and kind of follow that inspiration for a few years, and not be so much on trend seeking. And I will add, if I could give myself an advice as far as like, being a founder and starting a company, would be to think about distribution a lot sooner. I think definitely a first-time founder mistake is thinking too much about the product, and not thinking enough about how you're going to distribute that product. And I think I've definitely changed my perspective around, a great product doesn't necessarily sell itself. You really have to sort of build good channels that like disseminate that product and gets it into people's hands.
Yeah, so it's a perfect lead into what I was wondering next, which is how is advertising to this new generation really different from previous generations?
Yeah, it's they've kind of scrapped the marketing handbook, and it's probably being reinvented, every week with every new TikTok trend. The biggest one is just like directness and transparency, like the kind of model of like excuse me, like salesiness, and hiding a little bit behind the facts just doesn't fly anymore. I feel like, younger people who are just like, chronically online and consume so much information just have a great bullshit detector, honestly. And you can just tell when someone is selling to you, and you just kind of filter that out immediately. So being able to just be direct, be honest, focus more on like providing value and not trying to take something. Actually, the more you give, I think the better for building a sort of customer relationship. Excuse me. And so it's really just trying not to be by the book and trying to be very, very honest about what it is you're trying to do.
Yeah. So, what was your process of really raising capital and going to investors, or I guess VCs? And what were the biggest challenges you faced while going through this process?
Yeah. Fundraising is, a roller coaster. You really kind of have to strap on and build a thick skin and be ready to get rejected a lot. And you just kind of have to push through it. It's painful. You really have to try to reach out to enough people. And you might have the network already, but you might not. And you sort of have to dig deep. You have to reach out to a lot of other founders to get introductions to investors. You have to try to network in person as much as possible. Earlier stage investing is so much about people relationships, and investing in the people, not so much the idea. So meeting face to face makes a huge difference. So, you just really have to, spend a lot of time. And when you're CEO, it's a full-time thing. You're just networking, reaching out, pitching. So you're able to like improve your storytelling and what you're kind of after. That stuff is really, really important. And you just kind of have to keep going until you land the right people who want to support you. There's thousands of investors out there. But you just kind of need one to support you so you can build your company. And I will say that I feel like a slight sort of change of tide in that a lot of investors are looking a little bit more on revenue instead of just like pure growth numbers. And this is even more so the case in Europe over the US. Just because, there's been too many instances of companies that just like flew high, got a lot of capital, never were able to sort of drive revenue and just blew up really quickly. So I think they're looking for a little bit more sort of responsible use of capital and more responsible numbers. So it's kind of important to do it at the right time when you sort of can back up the story with your numbers. But really, when it comes down to it, it's just a grind, and you have to like push through it, and you just keep getting better at it, because if you're building a high growth tech startup, you're going to be fundraising fairly often.
I think revenue is, as you said, very important. So my question for you is, how does Quirk make money, or what are the plans to monetize it in the future?
Yeah, so at the moment, the app is free to download. We make money through affiliate partners. So, we at the moment, we're not offering, investing services, for example, and we've partnered with a third party that we refer our users to, and we get paid for a successful conversion. And we're always super transparent with our users about this kind of relationship. So we've done similar things with things that provide kind of like, significant value to our users. And that might be, like a pension provider, or it might be an energy switching. So here, when you switch your energy or utility provider, you get big savings, as well as, maybe like broadband deals or internet deals, etc. So any area where they might be able to save money. We're now looking into cashback as well. So basically, not directly asking our users for money, but indirectly by giving them value, and then us sort of taking a cut of that transaction. At the same time, we're also working on a premium subscription. There are a lot of users that just, are more involved. They're more power users. They want more advanced feature sets. And there's a kind of like high willingness to pay from our research. So we're going to give the option for a premium plan. Down the line, a sort of third stream of revenue is when we actually build some kind of transactional financial service, whether that is more investing oriented, for example, or even potentially credit in a more responsible way, where there, the kind of use of the capital brings revenue directly without necessarily having a subscription cost on it.
For my final question, and I believe the final question of the podcast is, do you think crypto will take over the financial world? And do you think that Quirk has an advantage over its competitors when and if this happens?
Yeah, we can spend a whole nother podcast just talking about this, to be honest. I strongly believe in crypto. I really like crypto. At the same time, it's been 15 years since Bitcoin, and that's a long enough period to see where something is going. And it hasn't taken over, but it has become a super important asset, way of doing things. So I don't personally think it's going to take over. I think more and more the established financial infrastructure is going to borrow pieces of crypto. The thing that is interesting is that the established banking system moves very slowly via regulation, versus crypto can really sort of like use tech and innovation to move a lot faster. But you have things happening like Luna, for example, where it just shows the need for consumer protection. And so I really just see governments not fully accepting crypto, but just taking the elements that they can make use of. But I do think it's a useful tool. We are building features in Quirk around crypto. And I think the sort of, leg up that we have over others is that we try to provide a sort of non-crypto native approach. So for example, we're building like a high yield savings product built around DeFi protocols where, for the user, it's just an experience of like depositing money into a savings account. It's not, crypto wallet, keys, understanding protocols and yield farming. It's just very simple because at the end of the day, they want to know that they're safely putting their money into a product, and that's going to give them a yield. And that's sort of the user experience that we're providing, and we're doing all the complicated stuff behind the scenes. So I think that's a big part of crypto and good design, right? Just simplifying it, giving the value to the user, and you do all the hard work without them really seeing it, but always sort of being very transparent and providing the sort of necessary knowledge for them to make the informed decision. So I think we're striking that balance quite well. And a lot of crypto players tend to get like very into the sort of crypto hardcore mentality and lose that sort of user experience thinking to them.
Yeah, I think one more question I have is, during Brown, was there anything that you were like exposed to, you got interested in, that really like helped you out now with your CEO role that you have now?
I honestly think one of the biggest learnings I took from Brown, due to its more kind of, liberal and flexible approach to learning with the open curriculum and a general kind of atmosphere of, crafting your own path, trying new things, is being very open to trying new things and importantly failing. It mirrors real life and it mirrors entrepreneurship a lot better. If you're just trying to be a straight A student, you're just, learning how the grading system works, and you're just gaming that ultimately. But when you're building a company, there's really no handbook to how to get things done. So you really have to be able to experiment, fail, learn from that, get up and try again. And it's just constantly this process again and again and again. So I'm glad that Brown encouraged that way of thinking. And I think it's hugely important for entrepreneurs.
I think that's it for me for questions. Pierce and Alex, do you have any more?
I have no more questions.
Answered them all.
All
Great.
right. Thank you, Nikos, for coming on.
Awesome. It's great to be on the pod, guys. Thanks so much.